Modesto, a quiet town nestled in the heart of California's Central Valley, was the picture of suburban tranquility. But behind the closed doors of the Peterson home, a tragic story was unfolding that would captivate the nation. Scott and Laci Peterson were the quintessential American couple, young, attractive, and full of promise. Scott, a successful fertilizer salesman, and Laci, a vibrant and joyful schoolteacher, seemed to have it all. They had met in college and quickly became inseparable. Their love story was the stuff of fairy tales. In 2002, they were eagerly awaiting the birth of their first child, a baby boy they planned to name Connor. Friends and family described them as a loving couple, excited to start their family. But beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life, dark clouds were gathering. Laci was 8 months pregnant when she went missing on December 24, 2002. Scott reported her missing that evening, claiming she had gone for a walk with their dog Mackenzie and never returned. The community rallied, launching extensive search efforts to find the missing mother-to-be. Volunteers scoured the area, and Laci's face quickly became a fixture on the news. The search for Laci Peterson was relentless. The local police, the FBI, and hundreds of volunteers combed through fields, rivers, and neighborhoods, hoping to find any trace of her. But as the days turned into weeks, hope began to fade, and the spotlight started to turn on Scott Peterson himself. Scott made several public appeals for Laci's safe return, but his behavior during these appearances raised eyebrows. Observers noted that he seemed oddly detached, even aloof. As the investigation progressed, more troubling details began to emerge. Scott had been having an affair with a woman named Amber Frey, a revelation that would turn the case on its head. Amber Frey, a massage therapist from Fresno, had met Scott a month before Laci's disappearance. Scott had told Amber he was single, and they had started a relationship. When Amber saw news reports about Laci's disappearance, she was horrified to realize that the man she had been dating was at the center of a nationwide search for his missing pregnant wife. Amber contacted the police and began cooperating with the investigation, recording her phone conversations with Scott. These recordings would become a crucial part of the prosecution's case against him. As investigators dug deeper, Scott's web of lies began to unravel, painting a picture of a man living a double life. The evidence against Scott was mounting, and on April 18, 2003, he was arrested and charged with the murders of Laci and Connor Peterson. The trial that followed would become one of the most watched and debated legal battles in recent history, dividing public opinion and leaving a lasting impact on the community of Modesto and beyond. Scott Lee Peterson was born on October 24, 1972 in San Diego, California. He grew up in a large family with 5 half-siblings. Scott was described as a charming and ambitious young man. After high school, he attended California Polytechnic State University, where he majored in agricultural business. Scott had a passion for golf and even considered a career as a professional golfer. However, his path would change when he met Laci Rocha in 1994 at a small cafe where Scott worked as a waiter. Laci Denise Rocha was born on May 4, 1975, in Modesto, California. She grew up in a close-knit family and was known for her vibrant personality and infectious smile. Laci had a love for gardening and a passion for teaching. She attended California Polytechnic State University, where she majored in ornamental horticulture. When Scott and Laci met, there was an instant connection. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and they were inseparable. Scott's charm and Laci's vivacity made them a perfect match. They married on August 9, 1997, in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by family and friends. The newlyweds settled in Modesto, California, where Scott took a job as a fertilizer salesman. His career was promising, and he quickly became successful. Laci worked as a substitute teacher and dedicated her time to creating a warm and loving home. In 2002, after several years of marriage, Scott and Laci received the joyous news that they were expecting their first child. Laci was ecstatic, and she threw herself into preparing for the arrival of their baby boy, whom they planned to name Connor. As Laci's due date approached, she was the picture of happiness. Friends and family described her as glowing with anticipation. She took pride in decorating the nursery and shared her excitement with everyone around her. To their neighbors and friends, the Petersons seemed to have it all. They were the epitome of the American dream, a loving couple, a beautiful home, and a baby on the way. But beneath this idyllic exterior, trouble was brewing. Scott's job as a fertilizer salesman required him to travel frequently, and the pressures of his career were beginning to take a toll. Despite their outward happiness, there were signs of strain in their marriage. Scott's long hours and frequent absences left Laci feeling lonely and neglected. Friends noticed that Scott seemed increasingly distant, and Laci confided in close friends that she was struggling with the challenges of impending motherhood and maintaining their relationship. Still, Laci remained hopeful and determined to make their marriage work. December in Modesto was a festive time. The community was adorned with holiday decorations, and the spirit of Christmas was in the air. Laci, always enthusiastic about celebrations, had decorated their home beautifully, preparing for both the holidays and the arrival of baby Connor. Laci's friends and family noted how happy and energetic she seemed, eager to welcome her new baby. She attended prenatal yoga classes, shopped for baby clothes, and even planned a baby shower for the new year. To the outside world, she was a glowing, expectant mother. Meanwhile, Scott Peterson was increasingly consumed by his job. As a fertilizer salesman, his work often took him out of town, adding to the stress and distance between him and Laci. His long hours and frequent absences left Laci feeling isolated and alone. Scott's behavior during this period began to raise questions. He seemed distracted and detached, even in social settings. Friends and colleagues noted that he was not his usual charming self. Little did they know Scott was leading a double life. Scott had met Amber Frey, a massage therapist from Fresno, in November 2002. He had told Amber that he was single and looking forward to his first holiday season without a wife. Amber, unaware of Scott's true marital status, began dating him, and their relationship quickly intensified. Scott and Amber spent time together, completely unbeknownst to Laci. Scott's lies to Amber were extensive. He portrayed himself as a single man free of commitments. This deception added another layer of complexity to Scott's life, one that would soon unravel in the most public way. As Christmas approached, the strain on Scott became more evident. On December 23rd, Scott and Laci attended a holiday party at Laci's sister's house. Observers later noted that Scott seemed preoccupied, his mind elsewhere. The next day would mark the beginning of a nightmare for Laci's family and the community of Modesto. On December 24, 2002, Laci Peterson was seen for the last time. Scott reported her missing that evening, claiming she had gone for a walk with their dog, Mackenzie, and never returned. This report set off a massive search effort, mobilizing friends, family, and the entire community. Volunteers scoured parks, neighborhoods, and waterways, holding out hope that Laci would be found safe. The community rallied around the Peterson family, but as days turned into weeks, hope began to fade. All eyes turned to Scott Peterson, whose behavior during this critical time raised suspicion. Scott made several public appeals for Laci's safe return, but his demeanor was perplexing. He seemed oddly detached and unemotional, sparking questions among those close to the case. As the investigation continued, more troubling details about Scott's secret life came to light. Amber Frey, a massage therapist and single mother from Fresno, had met Scott Peterson in November 2002. They were introduced by a mutual friend, and Scott quickly charmed Amber with his good looks and smooth demeanor. He told her he was single and looking forward to his first holiday season without a wife. Unaware of Scott's true marital status, Amber began dating him. They spent time together, going on romantic outings and enjoying each other's company. Scott's lies to Amber were extensive and detailed, designed to keep his double life hidden. He even went so far as to bring her gifts and make future plans, further cementing their relationship. When Amber saw news reports about Laci Peterson's disappearance, she was horrified to realize that the man she had been dating was at the center of a nationwide search for his missing pregnant wife. Torn between shock and a sense of duty, Amber contacted the police and agreed to cooperate with the investigation. Amber began recording her phone conversations with Scott, providing investigators with crucial evidence. These recordings revealed a man who was manipulative and deceitful, weaving a web of lies to maintain his affair while presenting a different persona to the public. In these conversations, Scott maintained his facade even as the search for Laci intensified. He assured Amber that he would be with her soon, never once revealing the truth about his wife's disappearance. The recordings painted a chilling picture of Scott's duplicity. As the investigation progressed, the police began to piece together Scott's movements on the day of Laci's disappearance. His alibi, that he had been fishing in the San Francisco Bay, was scrutinized, and inconsistencies in his story emerged. Scott's public demeanor contrasted sharply with the private conversations he was having with Amber. To the public, he was a grieving husband. To Amber, he was a man planning a future free of marital ties. This duality fueled suspicion and cast a long shadow over his claims of innocence. With the weight of Amber's recordings and mounting circumstantial evidence, the police intensified their search efforts, focusing on the areas Scott had mentioned in his alibi. The community's initial support for Scott began to wane as doubts about his innocence grew. Amber Frye's brave decision to come forward and her subsequent testimony would be instrumental in building the case against Scott Peterson. Her cooperation with the authorities highlighted the extent of Scott's deception and provided the prosecution with a powerful narrative of betrayal and premeditation. On April 13, 2003, a couple walking their dog along the shoreline of the San Francisco Bay made a gruesome discovery. The decomposed body of a small baby boy washed ashore, later identified as Connor Peterson. The following day, just a mile away, the remains of an adult female were found. The body was so badly decomposed that it was almost unrecognizable, but dental records confirmed the worst fears. It was Laci Peterson. The discovery of Laci and Connor's bodies intensified the investigation. Forensic experts worked tirelessly to piece together the evidence. The condition of the remains suggested they had been in the water for an extended period, consistent with the timeline of Laci's disappearance. With this tragic discovery, the spotlight on Scott Peterson grew even harsher. His alibi of fishing in the San Francisco Bay on the day Laci disappeared was now under intense scrutiny. Investigators began to unravel the web of lies Scott had spun to cover his tracks. Police examined Scott's truck and boat, searching for any evidence that could link him to the disposal of Laci's body. They found a hair in a pair of pliers on Scott's boat that matched Laci's DNA. This crucial piece of forensic evidence further implicated Scott in the crime. Scott's behavior continued to raise red flags. Despite the mounting evidence against him, he maintained his innocence, but his public demeanor was increasingly seen as cold and unfeeling. Friends and family who had initially supported him began to question his actions and statements. On April 18, 2003, Scott Peterson was arrested near a La Jolla golf course. He had dyed his hair blonde and was carrying $15,000 in cash, multiple cell phones, and his brother's driver's license. Police believed he was attempting to flee the country, a suspicion that only added to the case against him. Scott was charged with 2 counts of murder, one for Laci and one for their unborn son, Connor. As he was taken into custody, the community of Modesto was left reeling. The man they had once seen as a grieving husband was now the prime suspect in a double homicide. Laci's family, who had been tireless in their efforts to find her, were devastated by the confirmation of her death and the arrest of Scott. They had trusted him, supported him, and now felt the ultimate betrayal. As the case moved towards trial, the prosecution and defense teams began to prepare for what would become one of the most watched and debated legal battles in recent history. The evidence against Scott was compelling, but the defense was ready to fight, claiming his innocence and pointing to alternative theories. From the moment Laci was reported missing, the Modesto Police Department had been suspicious of Scott Peterson. His behavior during the search efforts had raised numerous red flags. Now, with the physical evidence of the bodies, the focus was on proving his involvement beyond any doubt. Scott's alibi of fishing in the San Francisco Bay was examined in detail. Investigators tracked his movements on December 24, 2002, and scrutinized every aspect of his story. The inconsistencies began to pile up, painting a picture of a man who was hiding the truth. Forensic evidence played a crucial role in the investigation. The hair found in Scott's boat, which matched Laci's DNA, was a significant piece of the puzzle. Experts also examined the concrete anchors Scott had made, which were suspected to have been used to weigh down Laci's body in the bay. Authorities conducted extensive searches of the San Francisco Bay, using sonar equipment and divers to look for additional evidence. While no more physical evidence was found, the location of Laci and Connor's bodies in the bay was a damning connection to Scott's alibi. Amber Frye's cooperation with the police provided invaluable insights into Scott's state of mind and his attempts to manipulate those around him. The recorded phone calls between Scott and Amber, in which he continued to lie about his situation, were a key part of the prosecution's case. Detectives also uncovered Scott's internet search history, revealing that he had researched ocean currents and the locations of various marinas in the days leading up to Laci's disappearance. This evidence suggested premeditation and further implicated Scott in the planning of the crime. By the time Scott Peterson was arrested, the investigators had built a strong circumstantial case. The combination of forensic evidence, witness testimonies, and Scott's own actions painted a clear picture of guilt. However, the defense was prepared to challenge every aspect of the prosecution's case. The stage was set for a courtroom battle that would captivate the nation. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Rick DiStaso, was determined to secure a conviction. The defense, led by renowned attorney Mark Geragos, aimed to cast doubt on the evidence and present alternative theories. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Rick DiStaso, laid out a compelling narrative of deceit, betrayal, and murder. In his opening statement, DiStaso painted Scott Peterson as a cold, calculating individual who murdered his wife and unborn child to free himself from the constraints of family life. Rick DiStaso: Scott Peterson was living a double life. While Laci was preparing for the arrival of their baby, Scott was planning a future with his mistress. This was not a case of sudden rage or impulse. This was premeditated murder. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence against Scott. They showcased the recorded phone calls with Amber Frey, revealing Scott's continued deceit and lack of remorse. They highlighted the forensic evidence, including the hair found in Scott's boat and the concrete anchors, which they argued were used to dispose of Laci's body. Forensic experts took the stand to explain the significance of the evidence. The DNA analysis of the hair, the examination of Scott's internet search history, and the analysis of the ocean currents all pointed to a meticulously planned crime. The defense, led by renowned attorney Mark Geragos, countered with a narrative of its own. Geragos argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that the prosecution had failed to provide a direct link between Scott and the murders. He suggested alternative theories, including the possibility of a random abduction by unknown assailants. Scott Peterson himself took the stand, a risky move that could either humanize him or further incriminate him. He maintained his innocence, claiming he had nothing to do with Laci's disappearance and death. Under cross-examination, however, his demeanor and inconsistent answers did little to sway the jury in his favor. Laci's family provided emotional testimonies, recounting the impact of Laci's disappearance and death on their lives. Their heartbreak and pleas for justice resonated deeply with the jury and the public. As the trial progressed, several key moments stood out. Amber Frey's testimony was particularly impactful. She described her relationship with Scott and her shock upon learning of his deception. The recorded phone calls between her and Scott, played in court, left a lasting impression. After 5 months of testimony, the case was finally in the hands of the jury. They deliberated for over a week, carefully weighing the evidence and arguments presented by both sides. The nation waited anxiously for the verdict. On November 12, 2004, the jury returned with their verdict. Scott Peterson was found guilty of first-degree murder for the death of Laci Peterson and second-degree murder for the death of their unborn son, Connor. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of relief and sorrow. Outside the courthouse, the reactions were mixed. Some felt justice had been served, while others believed there were still unanswered questions. But for Laci's family, the verdict brought a measure of closure. During the sentencing phase, the prosecution presented additional evidence of Scott's deceit and the impact of his actions on Laci's family. Emotional testimonies from Laci's mother, Sharon Rocha, and other family members conveyed the profound loss and suffering they had endured. Sharon Rocha: "We trusted you, Scott. We loved you like a son, and you betrayed us in the most unimaginable way. Our lives will never be the same without Laci and Connor." The defense, led by Mark Geragos, argued that Scott's life should be spared. They highlighted his lack of a prior criminal record and presented character witnesses who spoke of his positive attributes. They also emphasized the circumstantial nature of the evidence. After careful consideration, the jury recommended the death penalty. On March 16, 2005, Judge Alfred DeLucchi formally sentenced Scott Peterson to death by lethal injection. The sentence was met with a mixture of relief and sorrow from Laci's family, who had finally seen justice served. Scott Peterson was sent to San Quentin State Prison, where he would join California's death row. However, the legal battles were far from over. Peterson's defense team immediately began the process of filing appeals, arguing that he had not received a fair trial. The appeals process would drag on for years, keeping the case in the public eye and continuing to stir debate. In August 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned Peterson's death sentence, citing significant errors in jury selection. While his conviction was upheld, the ruling meant that Peterson would be re-sentenced. The impact of the case on the community of Modesto was profound. The once quiet town had been thrust into the national spotlight, and the ripple effects of the tragedy were felt for years. Friends and neighbors who had known Scott and Laci struggled to reconcile the public narrative with their personal memories. Laci and Connor Peterson's memory was honored through numerous memorials and tributes. The community came together to support Laci's family and to ensure that her legacy lived on. The case also brought attention to issues of domestic violence and the importance of early intervention. Legal experts and commentators continued to analyze the case, debating the evidence, the trial proceedings, and the broader implications for the justice system. The Scott Peterson case remains a subject of study in law schools and criminal justice courses across the country. Today, Scott Peterson remains incarcerated, awaiting resentencing. The case serves as a stark reminder of how quickly a facade of normalcy can shatter, revealing the darkest aspects of human nature. For Laci and Connor's loved ones, the quest for justice and healing continues. The story of Scott Peterson is a complex and tragic one, filled with betrayal, loss, and the relentless pursuit of justice. As we reflect on this case, we are reminded of the fragility of life and the enduring impact of the choices we make. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of the most infamous murder cases in recent history.